Today, I want to share with you my favorite screen replacement techniques that make use of AI, the machine-learned point tracker, IntelliTrack that's in DaVinci Resolve Studio 20. But we're also going to take a look at manual tracking and how do we deal with tracking when the AI fails us, like lots of motion blur or when things go completely off screen. And I'm breaking it into 5 simple chapters for you that are marked and you can skip around. So we're going to start with composition settings, then we'll go to AI tracking, manual tracking, controlling reflections, and finally, how do you send your alpha over to the color page? If you want to support the channel and follow along with the same clip, just go to creativevideotips.com to download the clip and let's get started. Project settings. So here's the clip we're working with today. It is from a Sony FX3 shot S-Log. You can see there's no tracking markers on it whatsoever, and there's lots of motion blur. Don't worry though, we can still track this using AI and our manual methods. And we got all these nice reflections because the screen was completely off. This is how you should shoot if you want reflections. Don't shoot with a green phone. Don't worry, we got other tools to take care of roto nowadays. Don't shoot with big tracking markers because they're just bigger to paint out. And let's get into color management settings next. So down in the lower right, this gear cog is going to get us to our project settings. I'm going to turn on project-wide color management, color science, DaVinci YRGB color managed, and we'll change the processing mode to HDR, which is good for log footage. If you have log footage, it's HDR footage. And it'll be mapped out to a Rec 709 display. That's what I have, a TV right next to me, Flanders. Hit save, nothing has happened. And that's because with Sony footage in particular, it doesn't have raw metadata in it to tell Resolve to do the conversion to Rec 709 for us. So we just have to give it a little bit more information. The way you can do that is just select all your clips in the media pool, right click, come down to input color space. Now this is a new option that will exist only if you have Resolve color management turned on. Come over here. This is going to be all these different cameras. We're going to choose Sony, and it'll be S-Gamut 3 Cine S-Log 3, which can often be found in the metadata of the file using the camera manufacturer application. So now everything looks normalized for Rec 709 for our display. Let's get this down onto a timeline with some trims on it so I can explain handles and how Fusion counts frames because it changed in Resolve 20. So I'm going to move this to about 10 frames in. How do I know if it's 10 frames in? Well, the very beginning of a clip, when it's brought into DaVinci Resolve, starts at frame 0 in the media pool. That's just how it works. The beginning of the first frame is frame 0. Now, that's not always the case when you go into Fusion as of Resolve 20. So let's take a look at this clip. We can see the source frame. If you right-click on the timecode up here, say source frame, and you can clearly see it's frame 0. So I'm going to move my jog wheel around here till we get to frame 10. We'll make that our endpoint. I'll hit I on the keyboard for endpoint. And we'll go to where the phone just comes off screen, maybe right there, frame 81. O for out point. So we have some trims on this. This will make more sense once we edit to the timeline. I'm going to edit to the timeline with this overwrite button that's built in right there. And the main thing that's important here to understand, because I need to work with handles for this composition, is don't place it at the very beginning of your timeline. And the reason why is you can't access these frames over here if it's right at the beginning of a timeline. It's just a little gotcha about Fusion. So now that this is down here, you can also always see your source frames once they're edited to a timeline. If you take a look up here in the upper right, by right-clicking on that time code saying source frame, you can see frame 10 is our source frame. The reason I'm stressing this so much is because this is how the media pool sees frames, and this is how the Fusion page, using the older classic Fusion numbering, or a media in 2, media in 3, media in 4 that's brought directly into the Fusion page, sees frames. But if you take a look at the project settings now, we have a new option. Some are going to love this, some are going to hate it. It's the new default start frame. So default start frame 0 means the edited endpoint that's on the timeline. So what is now frame 10 will become frame 0 when I open it in Fusion with this set. Unless I change it to Legacy Fusion Composition Frame Rate Count, check the box, and the very first time you create a comp, it basically takes these settings on. That would take the media pool source for your media in 1. This default is going to take your edited endpoint on the timeline and make that frame 0, which means if you have handles, you're going into negative numbers, which is not a big deal. I'm going to show you how to deal with that next. So we're going to leave all this as defaults because that's probably how you have your set. And we'll go directly into Fusion. You can see frame 10. As soon as I go into Fusion, just park your playhead over the clip you want to work on. Hit Fusion. You don't even have to do anything else. It stayed on the same frame. Didn't have to go to any other application. It's a wonderful thing. And I come over here and you'll see it's now frame 0. So there's negative frames. It goes to frame -10, right? So that's the point of that new frame counter thing and why you need to watch out for it. I need to go left here so that I can create motion blur that is using tracking data that is before the frame that cuts in on the timeline, right? So I'm going to move this yellow guy here is my render range. It can just drag this number here back to like -5, give me 5 frames of handles on it. And I can see I've got access to all that footage there, even though I'm at negative frames. Not a big deal. Where it becomes an issue sometimes is when you bring another piece of footage in and you can't see it in the viewer. So let's go to my inserts section down here. I've got a checkerboard screen insert. I load it into the viewer. I'm in the negative range over here. I'm on frame -2, and this median 2 just does not exist. If you ever have a gray viewer here, it's probably because the frame doesn't exist yet. If I come along, oh, it exists as soon as I hit to frame 0 in the composition, but it didn't exist earlier. One way you can diagnose this quickly, I'm going to close my media pool here, is to take a look at the keyframes panel down here, hit the zoom to fit button, and you'll notice as my playhead, this is the same cursor right here, that media in 2 down here, this checkerboard doesn't exist earlier on. So how do we move it over? You can just drag it here in the keyframe editor. It's kind of like a timeline. Or another simple thing you can do, just click the media in 2 and change your global in and out and just drag this slider over here till you get to -5. And now we've got that in alignment. So the very first frame of this is the first frame of handles that I care about tracking that media. AI tracking. Now that I don't need my keyframes to align these different plates anymore because they both exist on into the handles, I'm going to close my keyframes palette by just clicking the keyframes button up there. And we're going to stack this up. I'm working mid-flow vertical as always. That's workspace, layout presets, fusion presets, mid-flow vertical. So I'm starting at the top. I'm going to add stuff from the right side. And we'll add a tracker node to get started. So shift space is a shortcut to get to the tool picker. TRA, hit return. It adds it right after the selected node. Now, if I take a look at this, I always want to make sure I load the node I'm working on. So I'm clicking, holding, and dragging. You can see up here it says tracker 1. Now, I'm going to hit play. You could even come down here if you wanted to say ping pong this, so it goes back and forward from the render range beginning to end. I'm looking for areas of high contrast. I'm zooming into the screen with middle mouse click, left right drag with the Wacom, or it's a command or control scroll wheel on the mouse, because you do need to get in close for this. Because I don't have tracking markers, I need to look for small details, small contrast points. And one thing I'm finding is the edge of the phone has lots of little specks and, you see that right there? A little dot. I don't know if that's somehow they built the phone. That's going to make a great point tracking mark to get, even right here, there's a little piece of junk up there. That's going to work really nice. Now, what you cannot do with phones with reflections is you can't track reflections. The reason you can't track reflections is because it's not on the surface. So we can't track reflections. We can't track occlusions. We cannot track, we shouldn't track specular highlights because they're always moving and they're not indicative of the surface. And the other big thing that we typically cannot track is an overlapping edge, like a foreground element overlapping a background element. But what I found with IntelliTrack, and this is new with IntelliTrack, because it's an AI-based, machine learned based off of objects, you can sometimes get away with tracking an overlapping edge. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. So the points I found that work good on this shot, and will work good on a lot of phones when there's a softer background from shallow depth of field, is I can place a point directly, like let's say right there, there's a little specular. If I come up here, there's another little specular right there. That's trackable. That's all you need. You don't need a big old tracking marker point to get a good track on a phone or any sort of mirrored screen surface. So to set this up, pretty simple. We're taking the media into. Now, it's important to understand the media into your screen insert needs to be the same aspect ratio as the physical device you're setting it on, whether it's 16:9, 9:16. The actual iPhone screen is not 9:16, if you're wondering. It's actually 9:19.5. 9:19.5, which comes to a 0.46 ratio. But what I did is I made a screen capture from my phone, which is 884 by 1920. This is a checkerboard that I had created just so you can make sure you're not distorting in an image. This will be on Cutting Club with the clip if you want to download it. But I'm going to stick this into the tracker. We're going to do a rough corner pin and we'll get to tracking. So The tracker itself can merge clips for you, and we're going to use that for the initial setup and adjusting the track, and at the end we're going to pull it out separately. So median 2 goes in the green foreground, yellow is the background, the input. The tracker needs the input always, but if you want to get to the corner pin right away, get 4 trackers right away, go to Operation instead of None, go to Corner Positioning. That automatically will create 4 tracking points. You don't have to worry about things like adaptive mode or anything like that when you're using the IntelliTrack. Now I just need to line these up. I'm going to start on my very first frame that I want to track. So I'm coming down here so that I'm going to frame -5. So I'm working in those handles. And I'm just going to drag my little crosshair here, this matchbox, I guess is what I would call it, and stick this directly on a high contrast area. Again, I'm moving in with middle mouse click left and right on the Wacom. It'd be Control or Command mouse wheel. And we'll just line this up on tracking points. It doesn't need to be in alignment with the screen. I'm just doing this for tracking data, and we will actually line it up using the offsets next. So those are stuck onto 2 nice tracking points before I begin tracking. Let's come down here. And you'll notice it's a little darker on the image in this little preview box, and that's because we're working in linear. It's actually looking at this image here, but the viewlet's all taken care of. That's the beauty of Resolve color management. And let's say that's good for that little marker there. So those are the points I want the thing to stick to, but it's not the exact location of how the image should look when it's not stretched out. We'll deal with the offsets in just a moment, but let's start to track this and see how it's looking. So to track forward, we're already starting all the way to the left on -5. This is our track forward button. Click, and it can do all the points at the same time. Not a big deal. You can obviously go one at a time if you want. I've shown that a lot in the past. And we got pretty far. AI, of course, fails us when we get to one of these frames down here. And we're going to prune this out, and I'll do the offsets, and so we'll see. So let's find the frame when this thing fails. I'm going to use the bracket keys, which is our frame forward and backwards buttons, to find out when it fails. So it seems good. We're on 63 right there. That seems fine on that point. Seems fine on that point. Let's see, does it hold up here? Seems good there. So frame 63 is good. Everything to the right of 63 is garbage. So what we'll do is we're going to delete everything after 63, and we're not using gradient extrapolation. We're going to use click append to fix this thing up perfectly. So 63 is good. We're going to delete the bad tracking keyframes. That's these keyframes down here. Go to the spline editor. Click on the tracker box. This little checkbox here gives us access to all the keyframes it made for us. I'm going to hit this zoom to fit button, maybe even zoom in with the magnifying glass, lasso, drag, and from 63 onwards, so 64 onwards, I'm going to lasso select those, hit the delete key on the keyboard, and now I've cleaned up all of that bad tracking data, and I need to manually create new tracking data after this point. But before I do that, I want to line up this screen so that I can see it in context, right? So I'm going to go back to frame 1 and set up some offsets. Now the offsets are not keyframes. They're just basically an offset of that point to the corner where I want the screen to actually go. So I will go up here. I'm going to turn off my spline editor. Just give me more room again. Zoom in over here. And you can either manually select the point over here. This is IntelliTrack 1, it's telling me. And scrub this offset X and Y, or the better, more hands-on approach, as long as you zoom in close, you can do this right by clicking on it, but you need to choose this little option up here. So this is our offset widget control. Once you make that blue, it's enabling you to click and drag and offset that corner from the actual point that was tracked. So if I grab this little crosshair, this up and right green guy, with the blue selected, you can see I've got this. It's moving these numbers, which you could have done over here, but you can just do it on screen visually so that we pull this up to the corner of where we want those edges to align. Now, don't worry about the edge being hard and it needs to be rounded. We're dealing with that in the next step. But I'm going to come in here, zoom in real close so I make sure to grab the actual point and you get that red dotted line as I pull in, try to align those, that top edge and that right edge based off of this initial frame here, which is frame -5. So I'll do that to all the 4 corners next. So I'm just grabbing it with the blue offset connected to all of these points, right? So now if we take a look at it, hey, it's filling the whole screen, and it's working because those 4 corners is all you need for a good screen replacement. However, the corners are not set. And so I found this on a lot of devices now. They don't have hard corners. So the way to deal with this is to actually mask off the source media. I don't mask off source media very often, but this is an instance where I don't necessarily need those pixels after they get masked, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So actually, let me adjust that just a little bit more. I'll turn off the offset, say we're good with that, and I'm going to grab a rectangle mask tool, and I'll drag that down to here. This is going to go into the mask input of media in2, and if I take a look, it's cropped in a bunch, but all you need to do, we're going to be using the corner radius of the rectangle mask. I'm going to expand the width to be full size of the image that it's attached to. It automatically sizes it to what it's attached to. And then if you drag the corner radius, watch what happens up here to the corners. Drag the corner radius, it makes a perfect rounded corner, which we can take a look at through the tracker while we adjust this to get a nice fit. So I've loaded the tracker into the viewer. I'm clicking on rectangle, so I'm changing a parameter while looking through the other one on this one. And I'm just dragging this until it sort of fits that curvature of the device or the phone. So that corner looks all right. That one looks maybe not as all right, but I can still come back here and adjust the offset. So if I come here, click the blue guy, which is my offset control, and I can fit that just as needed. You can go to town getting pixel perfect this way, but we haven't gotten it off screen yet. So that's where manual tracking comes up next. Manual track. Now, the first thing I do before I go into manually tracking something is get rid of the match boxes, the little crosshairs that IntelliTrack 1, 2, 3, 4 have on them, because they just get in the way of seeing the motion path. So I'll just zoom in and make sure you just click and drag on anywhere of the dashed, it's like a dashed line there. And that's going to allow you to move this off of this squiggly line path, which is what we're actually going to be modifying, tweaking, and adding new keyframes to towards the end of the shot to get this screen off and keep it in alignment with the phone. So I'm going to move to IntelliTrack 2 and just rinse and repeat for these others. So I'm just moving it off of there. These only have a function. This is important. These only have a function to look for an area to track when you push the track forward or backwards button. Otherwise, they do nothing by themselves. So you can move them off afterwards, which is what I'm doing right now. So I'm just going to drag, move that off so it's not overlapping my path at all. Let's shorten our render range. Our render range now is 5 to 81. If I just drag this up, it's just going to mean I'm wasting less time. We're going to go to our last good frame, which is frame 63. And I'm going to start by working on this path first, then this one, then this one, and then this one. And the reason why is that way it won't fold over itself when I'm actually creating manual track data. The manual track data is different from the offsets over here. I'm actually going to create, you see this track center 3xy? I'm going to create keyframes on these points for the tracking data, which is something you cannot do with the planar tracker that's built into Fusion. It doesn't expose its tracking data to you. So this is one thing that's really great about the manual control of this right here. So zooming in, we'll find this squiggly motion path. It ends, you'll notice if we use the bracket keys, that's how you go frame forwards and frame backwards. It ends on frame 63. Well, I need to keep following this little blurby sort of line down there, down off screen. The way you do that is you select the path first. The way you select the path is a little tricky. You just select any of these points on here, and then it selects the whole path. Now that it's red, you can see it's the only red path selected. The other thing that happened when you made that path red is you've gotten this whole line of polygon tools that you may be used to from other shape drawing tools in DaVinci Resolve Fusion. So the one I want to use is actually called Click Append. If you choose Click Append, it does what it sounds like. When I click on the screen, it draws the motion path and sets a keyframe at that moment. So right there, I've got a keyframe. If I go to my next frame, 64, there's no keyframe set. So I'm going to set the keyframe by actually clicking on the path. So clicking right there where I think that should go, and it set a keyframe for me. I'll go to the next frame with the bracket key. And on this one, I try to find a moment where I think it maybe goes right there. Oh, maybe not quite right there. I can still click and move this afterwards so I can align my edges. And you see I've set a keyframe. Now it does get trickier on these bottom ones, and that's why I use a checkerboard for this. But I move forward with the bracket key. I click, move forward, click, and I'm starting to lose a little bit of it. Click. I know it's rotating a little bit, so I might come over here, click, and click. And 71 or so frames is all I need to get it off screen. You can see I've successfully sort of taken that point and tracked it off screen. Now we have to go corner by corner to add this manual track data to get it off cleanly. So after you're done doing click appends, I strongly encourage you to come back to this tool palette up here, go back to modify only. So that way when I click on this new one, I'm not accidentally drawing a click append from one path to the other, right? So I'm gonna come back to the last good frame I had on this path over here and select this tool, and I'm not using click append, it's in modify only. I come over here, select any point on there, makes it red. So now I have click append available. I can choose click append. And this one is sort of hugged onto this little white dot on the phone. We're looking at tracker 4. That one has no keyframe set. Click right there. It moves it down. Go to the next frame. Click. And see, the purpose of setting up the screen insert first with this checkerboard is I can kind of see the alignment of it as I work and move my way down. Maybe that one needed to be down a little bit lower. But all of these points, you saw that modify only, you can modify these. Again, you can't do this with planar tracker. So I'm going all the way 69. Maybe that one's over here. And maybe that one's over here. Let's go one more. So to frame 71. Let's change this to max out at frame 71. So that gets us off screen there. And then we come back, we're done with that. So we come back to modify only, right? Now we'll come up here to the right path, the top right path, starting on 63. We select the path by clicking any point, turns red. Now we've got click append. And the path I'm trying to follow here is this white dot in the upper right. So click, move that there, click, move that over there. Click, and I'm kind of guessing where it is. Having the transparency blend mode on the overlay helps. But I know that lives there on the corner. Click, and completely off screen, somewhere down there. So we've got that sort of weird path. Now that we're done with that one, we come back over here. Change that to modify only so that I don't screw that up anymore. Back to 63. This is where it's going to start to come together now. On this one, it's extended with the offset all the way up to that corner, but the actual track data was down here by my finger. So I'll select the path by just selecting any point, turned red, click append mode, next frame, click, next frame, click, and you can, Command Z is always good. You can always, if you carefully select that point, you can reposition. Next frame with the bracket keys, click, move this into place down here. Next frame, click to append. And you can see motion blur does crazy things to footage sometimes, well, all the time. But we can always align it to the plate because we have full control over it. So I'm just looking for that moment over there. Maybe it's somewhere there. And frame 70 is off screen, so it doesn't matter too much where that is. Frame 71. So you can see we've got that moving off screen. Now that we've got points set that are roughly in place, right? It's not perfect yet. We'll get it perfect. We will change this one to modify only as well. So now you're not accidentally going to start making new points all over. We're just going to shift and move them. And the way we can really dial the details in here is by changing the tracker to have motion blur on it. So under the settings tab of the tracker tool, turn motion blur on. Just the quality of 1 is enough to get this in alignment. Frame 64 right here, it looks like maybe I was off a little bit. So all you need to do, you come in here where the little green crosshair is, and you just position this so that it looks correct. I'm moving the track data, not the offsets in this case. So that looks good to me. Let's see if over here on this one, if that looks all right. Maybe this one, just grabbing that corner there should fit somewhere right around there. We check the bottom, make sure that's decent. That's not bad, that's not bad. So I go to the next frame, 65, and I check the alignments on this one. So this one probably could use some tweaking. I'm just clicking on the up and right green arrow to sort of line up those edges. Same thing over here. something right around there should work. And I should have probably checked the bottom too. So I'll check these bottom frames to make sure that edge is still nicely hugged and tucked up down there. Now the thing with motion blur is once this is moving, you won't notice the overlaps too much. And ideally the motion blur should be like 50% on both sides of the screen. So let's say that's good on that frame. 66 is our next frame to deal with. Again, this one needs a little tweaking, so I'm just bringing this down. And you could have just modified the bad track data it gave you originally, but the reason I wanted to delete it is to show you how you can use click append to actually create the new keyframes, the new data. And sometimes when it's all jacked up and messed up, it's kind of hard to maneuver and manipulate on screen. So I would say we have a pretty decent looking track that's following off screen. Currently have it set to motion blur value of 1, which we will crank up to get better quality, no worries. And I've got the blend set way down to 0.48. So if you turn this up, you can see a little bit better how well that's sticking. So there you can see where manual tracking with click append with the tracking tool really comes in to save the day when AI fails us. Controlled reflections. Now, there's a couple ways of dealing with reflections with the tracker tool. You could just use it as is, but it's not as good. For instance, the tracking tool right now is in emerge mode. If you go to operation, you could set the apply mode and set in normal to something like screen, and you'll see those reflections shine through. But if you ever needed to dial back the reflection or increase the reflection, you're out of luck. All you could do is come to the settings, turn down the blend, and that is actually turning down the screen insert itself. So the better way, the way I suggest doing it, even though it is a little bit slower on the processing, is change the operation mode instead of being foreground over background to foreground only. And what this is doing, you can see, it's just giving you the foreground result, just the screen insert itself. But along with that comes an alpha channel. So if you come up here, you can see your alpha channel. And this alpha channel is going to be great for us for multiple reasons coming up. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to hit C for color, or just come back here to color mode. And now that I've got an alpha channel out of this, one thing I would like to do is clearly designate to any other Fusion compositor that's coming in here that I'm working with an alpha channel out of the tracking node. So I'll add a bitmap node to indicate that. So shift space, bitmap is the tool that makes a mask out of an image. So there is already an alpha channel coming out of this, but this is just to make it super, super clear. So I'll go into the bitmap mode with the tracker tool. And this channel is set to alpha. It may be set to luminance depending how I used it last or saved it, but channel alpha. Now I've got a nice alpha matte. In fact, it's going to have motion blur with that alpha, which is really, really handy to get a nice, smooth looking alpha. Before we get on further, we'll change our settings to increase the number of samples and the quality. But for now, while we're working, I like to keep this down really low to something like 1, which just means I'm sampling 1 frame before the frame I'm parked on and 1 frame after. And this is why I'm using handles, that negative frame handles that we talked about earlier. Now, this node right here has our colored image. I need to stick this back over our original footage to start this whole process of controlling the reflection. So I will add a shift space merge MRG node. It's going to take background over foreground, and that's just where we were before, just using the tracker only. But the reason we split this out is because I could extract this alpha channel separately. It's going to be really handy because what I want to do is I want to take these original reflections and stick them back over the top of the composite. So I'm going to do that. You could either do that with the channel booleans using the add mode. I'm going to use merge because there's a mode in merge that gives me an additive blend. So shift space, another merge, MRG. And this time, the background is actually going to be the comp, okay? The foreground is going to be the reflection, but a masked out version of the reflection. So I could just take this and stick this into the foreground and change it to add blend mode, but it's an opportunity for me to show you another node that will make it so the node graph over here is a little bit cleaner, and that's using a wireless link. So I'll hit shift space, and what wireless link is kind of like a way to just clean things up so you're not crossing these pipes all over the place. So the foreground for this wireless link, it just gives you this input well. Well, the input of this wireless link is going to be my footage. So what I've just done is I've taken my footage over the top of my composite that has the screen insert, and it's the original footage again, right? Because it's the merge by default is apply mode to normal. But there's a secret little powerful tool that's built into the merge, and that's this alpha gain slider. And right now alpha gain is set to 1, but if you bring this down to 0, it adds pixels. It is an additive blend. So it's a truly photorealistic way of putting a light source on top of the original comp. So add alpha gain down to 0 is the key here. The only thing is it did it to everything. If you see the original, it brightened everything up. It added everything on top of it. And I just want to brighten up the screen area. Well, we can do that because we have a mask input to this merge. We've got the mask. We just take this, it goes into the mask input, and now we've added the screen reflection in an add mode because we're set alpha gain to 0 on top of the whole thing, right? So we've got that original reflection. Now here's the thing. The merge node has 2 blend sliders. One's here on this page, one's on the settings. It doesn't really matter which one you use. You can see as I turn this down, it's effectively just turning down the screen reflection that's on there. But what if I want a little bit less? I go down to 0.5, but what if I want more? That's where you can gain up the original source reflection using a brightness contrast node, which, because we're working in the linear realm over here in Fusion, just using gain is like exposure. So shift space, BC is our brightness contrast tool, adding that right after our footage. Let's take a look at it. Brightness contrast, gain only. You can see I'm adding this in a very photometric way, I guess I would say, so that you can increase that reflection if you want to. The same thing goes for if you need to bring the exposure of the insert down. You can also add a brightness contrast node directly after the footage is where I would put it. So if I needed to bring this exposure down of the footage, just take gain down. Take a look here. Let's actually look at the result of the composite as I do that. And so that's like bringing the exposure of the insert down. I don't think we need to on this specific insert. And now to see this on the edit page, obviously just go to media out. You can go to the edit page and you probably will not get real-time playback. So what I often suggest anytime you use Fusion compositions is to right-click on these and actually use the render cache color output, because this will render it out after the color page changes, and include any of the Fusion stuff and change this over here to render cache user. So render cache set to user with cache color output, give it a second or so. This is set in your project settings, by the way. Under your master settings, you can say enable background caching after 1 second. That's what I like to do. And we should see the result there in the viewer. Color page alpha. Now, I already took the liberty on the color page with this clip to add a sort of a balance adjustment to it. So I've made it so it's not quite so blue. I use the what's called the chromatic adaptation. I've got a good tutorial on this one to adjust the white balance. And then I brought up the exposure here with the HDR exposure, but I don't want this to be affecting, I don't want both of these to be affecting the screen insert. I just want it to be affecting everything else. So the way you get access to the alpha channel made by the screen insert itself is over on the Fusion page. We have a media out 1. That's a special media out that you're normally used to, but you can also add shift space, another media out. And media out 2, you'll see this one has an index of 1. This media out has an index of 0. So I could take, for instance, this alpha channel from my bitmap straight into media out 2, and I can get access to this media out 2 in the color page. And the way that's done is on the color page, you may be used to adding alpha outputs. Well, you can also add a source. If you right click anywhere in your node flow, you can say add source. There's a new source. This source is that media out 2 from the Fusion page. So what that means is I can feed this as a mask into both of these nodes here. And this is the joy of nodes, right? I can reuse that same mask on both of those to restrict the color correction to just whatever that alpha output is. Now, because white reveals, black conceals, it's right now the adjustment. If I turn my grades on and off with Option D, it's doing the color correction to the insert, which is the opposite of what I want. But on each of these, if you come down here to your node key panel, you can just hit the invert button and you can see it's going to apply the opposite. So this one here, I'll hit the invert button. And now if I toggle the grade on and off, I'm adjusting everywhere where the screen insert is not. One final reminder, once you're happy with the way things are looking, go ahead in the tracker tool to settings, motion blur, and feel free to crank that quality of the slider of the motion blur up to a value of 5. This is going to hurt your render time, so that's why we didn't turn it up earlier. But a value of 5 in the motion blur should give you a much smoother and nicer result. Hey, thanks so much for sticking with me today. My name is Chadwick. This is Creative Video Tips, where I teach all things DaVinci Resolve. I'm actually also available oftentimes for doing one-on-one training. And because there's so much more to learn, I'll see you in the next video.